Most states allow exemption from state licensures in few circumstances. So grandfather clause describes an exemption for persons who were working within the profession prior to a deadline date. A lot of that has to do with advanced practice nurses. So like in the state of California, there are those who became advanced practice through a certification versus education and certification, and they're grandfathered in. But they might not be able to practice in another state. Research indicates that the higher the education level of the nurse, the lower the patient mortality rate. So let's see if we can see if they have anything here about grandfather provisions, okay? A certificate of registration to practice professional nursing as a registered nurse issued by the State Nursing Board or the Board of Nursing Education and nurse registration under former provisions of this chapter or by the Nurses Examining Committee of the State Board shall confer the same privileges and impose of 1988. So people who are grandfathered in from 1988 are those who are in the exemption. So anything after that, you have to follow the new rules. And your grandfather provision isn't necessarily going to protect you in another state. So keeping that in mind. Licensure across jurisdictions. So 4 means of granting licensure across jurisdictions. There's reciprocity. So if you're in a compact state, I think a lot of people in Kentucky are compact. So if you can practice in Kentucky, you can practice in, I'm pretty sure, in like West Virginia. California, I think, is part of compact, I think. Endorsement. So that's usually what I have to do. I'm Ohio. So if I want to, practice in Texas, I have to apply for licensure by endorsement, which means I don't have to go through like an NCLEX again and all that stuff. But it's, I can't just show my Ohio license in practice. Whereas in Kentucky, you can show your Kentucky license, and based on the fact that you're in good standing in Kentucky, you'll automatically get your license. There's licensure by examination and licensure by waiver. And so if you look on the Ohio Board of Nursing, it will talk to you about waiver and about examination. Temporary licenses are usually granted to out-of-state nurses while permanent licenses are pending, so they can practice for a limited time while they get, your transcripts and your background checks. Oftentimes your background check has to be done, but your transcripts can take a while, and if they do letters of recommendation. So foreign nursing graduates, they must meet requirements of the state territory in which they reside. They have to pass licensing examination, apply for an occupational visa, and they have to successfully complete a visa screen to verify proficiency in English. They need to earn a certificate from the Commission of Graduates of Foreign Nursing Schools or pass the National Council licensure exam. Disciplinary actions. Allowable disciplinary actions include private reprimand or censure. We've talked about that. So maybe you were reprimanded, but you weren't disciplined, so you can still practice. Public reprimand, probation, and then suspension of license. If your suspension's lifted, you can still practice. Or if you're working within your suspension. So allowable disciplinary actions include refusal to renew license. So if you accidentally, it's going to be considered refusal, but if you let your license lapse, a lot of times you will just renew it, but it's it can be considered disciplinary action. Revocation of licensure, imposition of a fine, requiring additional continuing education course, and that happens a lot when someone gets in trouble for negligence. So violations leading to disciplinary action, a felony or crime involving moral turpitude. So a DUI, you could get in trouble. Even if it had nothing to do with your job, you can get in trouble. So what we do, moral turpitude, what we do on our outside time represents us in the Board of Nursing. Fraud or deceit in obtaining your license, violation of the provisions of the Nurse Practice Act, so you prescribe medicine when you weren't supposed to, aiding or abetting any unlicensed person with unauthorized practice of nursing. So did you let someone put an IV in who wasn't allowed? Think about students. Did they put an IV in when they weren't allowed to? Obviously, if they're working under the student license, then they can in the right setting. revocation, suspension, or denial of licensure to practice nursing in another jurisdiction. So say, technically, if you're practicing in Kentucky, you do something wrong, they take away your license. Even if you did everything right in Ohio, they technically can take it away. Now, will they? It just depends. Habitual use of addiction to alcohol or drugs. There are a lot of state boards that give you like X amount of tries as long as you do certain things like go to rehab and prove that you have been working on your addiction. But I think there's X amount of times that you can do it, and then after that your license will be revoked permanently. Unprofessional conduct that's likely to deceive, defraud, or injure the public or patients. Lack of fitness by reason of physical or mental health that can result in injury to the public or individuals. So if you have Alzheimer's, that can be reported because you're not fit to take care of your patient anymore because you could forget something and hurt them. Now, that's not a punishment because of your, because of somebody's health status, but also we have to protect the public. Process of disciplinary hearings, so filing of the sworn complaint. There's an individual complaint, healthcare agency, or professional organization complaint. So the other thing, too, is sometimes organizations or you can be held responsible if you don't complain about something that you see. It's like if someone's like, oh, I got a DUI this weekend and it didn't get reported. I think you're mandated to report those things to the Board of Nursing. Now, I'm not saying go and report those things to the Board of Nursing. I'm just saying that can happen. I've never heard of anyone getting in trouble for not telling a Board of Nursing that somebody they knew got a DUI that had a nursing license. I think it's pretty hard when you go to renew your license. I think it would probably be really hard to not tell the Board of Nursing. I mean, they have the right to audit you. So they'll notice of the hearing to the involved nurse. The hearing will be done before the board. Evidence presented to the board and the nurse. Witnesses are called by the board and the nurse. Decision by the Board of Nursing, and then there's disciplinary action, right? So if found not guilty of misconduct, there's no action. If found guilty of misconduct, you can have a reprimand that's public or private. You can be placed on probation. You can deny the renewal of your license, and maybe there's provisions to that. Suspend the nurse's license, revoke the nurse's license, or allow them to enter diversions. We talked about rehab. Court review the board decision and concur with its findings. So you can file a lawsuit against the decision, dismiss the complaint, order new trial, or appeal to a higher court. During suspension or probation, the board may order substance abuse, rehab, or counseling, special counseling, like so say maybe you have anger management issues, supervision for specific techniques or procedures to validate competency. So maybe that nurse just needs a review on critical care stuff before they can go back into the nursing field. And then satisfactory completion of education program. So if you want to initiate a disciplinary process, a written complaint is filed with the State Board of Nursing. The complaint will then trigger actions. The complaint is screened and investigation is initiated if appropriate. Board hearings scheduled at which nurse is entitled to clear statement of the charges, etc. So due process rights of nurses. So if somebody gets in trouble, they have rights. Clear statement of the allegations. They can notice of time and place of hearing, disciplinary conference, or other proceedings. They have the right to counsel or to consult with legal counsel. Presentation of their own witness and evidence. They can challenge by presenting their own evidence or challenge that evidence. They can have a full hearing. They're due the right to a full hearing before the authorized board. Written record of the transcript, judicial review of requested of board's decision, and the nurse has the right to appeal the board's actions. Failure of the board to meet due process of the law may result in reversal of the board's decision. So common reasons for investigation: negligent or substandard care provided by a patient, sexual relations with the patient, abusive behavior, either physical or oral, substance abuse or diversion, physical or mental impairment, fraud usually committed in the application process. Misconduct, so obligation. So misconduct in a colleague is conduct that appears incompetent, unprofessional, unethical, fraudulent, indicative that the nurse is mentally or physically unable to engage safely in the nursing profession. Most states charge a fine or imprisonment for practicing without a license, from $50 to $500, and imprisonment does not exceed 60 days. Civil suits may also be filed by those harmed. So back up, we're obligated to report. So technically, we are obligated to report all these things that we see. And so, right, it's hard because you could say, like, I see people do things unethical all the time. I don't want to be a snitch. I don't want to do that. This is an ethics class. And so I'm just kind of laying it out to you what we're obligated to report.